Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of To The Point with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. After a relatively calm first week of the winter session of Parliament, week two has seen some rather usual or something that we're used to acrimonious scenes within the halls of Parliament. To talk about what's happening in Parliament and to talk about the opposition's strategy, I have with me on the program today a very special guest. He is the General Secretary of the Communist Party of India, Mr. Sitaram Yechury. Mr. Yechury, thank you for joining me on Rajya Sabha television. Welcome. Let's talk about what's happening in Parliament. We saw a relatively calm first week of Parliament. After that, we saw some, acrimonious scenes within Parliament itself. Is it a combined opposition strategy to try and drive home a point?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a calm first week. The first week had a lot of intense debate, and in that debates there was no calm. There was a lot of disquiet on what was happening in the country and what we had expected this government to do, and a lot of disappointment that this government has not risen to the occasion by at least committing many a thing that they should commit being in government. So I wouldn't say it was calm. It was calm in the sense there was no disturbance in the house, but it was very, very, very tumultuous in the sense of the issues that were raised and discussed.
Indeed, there were lively debates inside Parliament, and we all enjoyed to see lively debates. That's what parliamentarians are supposed to be doing.
That's right.
But that's not what's happening now.
Well, that is again the problem of what is the current issue that comes up at a time when the Parliament is in session. Well, there are some who are feeling very aggrieved about a matter, which they have their point of view, saying that the same yardstick is not being applied to other cases of that are there before the courts in the country. But anyway, the point is that it's a matter before the judiciary, and if the government is being biased on picking and choosing, you can't pick and choose over matters of delivery of justice. So there is some disagreement on that, but we would want, the left has been saying that we want the Parliament to function, and we have seen the productiveness of the Parliament when it functions.
You want the Parliament to function, so what is your view on one of the government's most crucial bill that it wants to be passed in this winter session of Parliament, that is the GST Bill? What are your views on the GST Bill?
You see, you have to understand certain matters. The GST Bill has a history which goes back to at least a decade. This was a proposal introduced by the then Manmohan Singh government, and at that point of time there was an empowered group of state finance ministers that was set up to consider the GST. The chair of that group was the Left Front Finance Minister of West Bengal then. They submitted a very detailed study and a report. And what we have in the Parliament today is a legislation based on that. So the left's role was already there in terms of the recommendations that came. Now, at that point, and that is a point of contention even today, according to our constitution and the federal structure we have, there is very limited scope for the state governments to raise resources and to implement programs which they have promised to the people during the state assembly elections. Now, the only major area where they can raise resources is what the state sales tax. Now, with the VAT coming in, half of that authority has already been eroded. Now, with the GST, that authority will completely cease. So naturally, the states have had a certain problem, and they want that to be addressed. So we have been asking this government, and particularly Prime Minister Modi, that for 6 years, this GST bill was stopped during the earlier government by the state governments led by the BJP. And as the Chief Minister of Gujarat then, Mr. Modi personally, for 6 years argued against the GST. So we asked the government, what has happened with your consultations with the state governments? You consult them, come back and tell us what is the position. A producing state, for instance, where there's a lot of industry that's producing, they lose out with the GST. Many a non-producing state or a consuming state, they gain. or the other way around in certain cases. Now the point is, how do you compensate the states?
So are you saying then in principle that you're not against the GST bill?
GST bill in principle we never have been, but this principle of the federal rights, how is that going to be protected? What are the mechanisms? That can be worked out. Earlier we had the Planning Commission. That used to be the forum. But now the Planning Commission doesn't exist. What has come in its place? The so-called Niti Aayog doesn't have this mandate of talking to the state governments and doing it. Till date, not a single all-party meeting was convened by this government on this issue. So where is the consultations? Now, if there's some consultations happening with the state governments, we should know, no? There are some state governments we know who are very strongly opposed to this measure. Now, how do you want to bring that in or accommodate that? Now, these are matters that need to be settled. And any amendment to the Indian Constitution, this GST requires an amendment.
Yes, it's a constitution amendment bill.
Amendment bill. Now, any amendment to the Constitution, particularly in such matters,
Needs to be ratified by 50% of the states.
yes. And now, if that is the issue, has that consensus been built up? We do not know. Now, the government is trying to say that we want the GST, the opposition is stalling it. That's not the case. I mean, the government has to explain why they, when they were not in government, opposed this. Why are they supporting this now? What is the change that has happened? What is the safeguards that you've incorporated? Nothing of this has been told to the parliament. So the GST is not happening. It is not happening because of a lack of clarity on the part of the government.
What are your suggestions? What amendments do you want to be made to the GST bill?
This federal principle, now the states lose their rights to raise resources. Now, how do you compensate for it? Now, there is a term that is called a tax neutral rate.
Yes.
Now, what we are saying is, let us have a tax fair rate. There's a big difference between what is neutral and what is fair. What is fair? I mean, what are the resources of that state? How it contributes? So it should get a greater share of for those resources. Now, these are matters that require a nitty-gritty discussion. No, but there's no scope. I mean, nothing, no opportunity has been created by this government to do that. And then to expect, saying GST will automatically, increase the GDP by 1.5 to 2 points. Now, how, for heaven's sake, tell us? Anybody who's done some rudimentary economics would like to know all the GST will do, prima facie, is that it will remove the bureaucratic hassles for corporate India in terms of multiple tax structures. Okay, uniform tax structure that removes a lot of bureaucratic hassle, fine. But how does it provide an impetus for growth? Now, that is a question you're begging for an answer. Now, that is where we come in to the picture, saying if you're linking it with growth in India cannot happen unless the people's purchasing power grows. Now, today, you have a world in a recession or virtually a stagnation. Exports are declining very rapidly because there is no global market. Now, you cannot compete in the global market with many of the main players. Now, how do you grow? By asking investments to flow in. Fine, investments, even if they flow. It is also a question mark. Suppose they flow. You've opened up all the areas for the FDI. Even if they flow, what they produce, where are they going to sell that? If what is produced is not sold, neither profits are made nor growth will happen. No, how can you achieve that? By increasing the purchasing power of our people. Instead, what is this government doing? The global oil prices are at one of the lowest. But 9 times your prices of petroleum products have been hiked. Your dal is now sky high, the price of it. Now you are having new cesses that are being put, Swachh Bharat cess. Now, you already have a road cess, an education cess, a Swachh Bharat cess. Now you want to add on a Skill India cess. Now all these are burdens that go directly to the people. And whatever disposable income even normal middle classes have in our country, that is shrinking. And the poor, you have agrarian distress, farmers committing suicides, industry is not taken off, so employment is not growing. So where do people have the money to buy what is being produced or what will be produced?
I think we've discussed the GST bill in detail and we've given it enough time. So let's move on and talk about something else. Before we move on to some of the other bills, I want to talk to you about intolerance. This is something that you raise time and again in Parliament and outside Parliament as well. Why do you feel that there is this issue of intolerance and the government is not doing anything about it?
First of all, you see, if you tell me, if somebody tells me that I should eat this, I should not eat this, I should wear these sort of clothes, I should not wear these sort of clothes. This is the God I pray to, not the God I would want to pray to.
But the government has not said any of that.
No, but listen to me. But I may not want to pray to any God. Government has not said it. But people in government are saying it. Ministers of the government are saying it. Members of parliament belonging to the ruling party are saying it. What were we asking from the Prime Minister of the country? He said, all that we are asking the Prime Minister of India and this government which is under oath of this very constitution, all we are saying is, according to our own law, we can take action against these people who are spreading such communal hate. Now, if I go to Bihar and campaign against the BJP, I am told you go to Pakistan. I mean, I've got no right to be here. Now, what else is this but intolerance? If you have Gharwapasi or you have, let's say, love jihad, I mean, how can you, and our constitution guarantees fundamental right that irrespective of caste, creed and gender, or sex is the word that we use in the constitution, equality for all citizens. Now, if you prescribe what you're doing like this, if on allegations of eating beef, people are lynched, Dalits are burnt, now what else is this? And this is the intolerance which goes against the grain of what is India. And that is why we are concerned. And the reason why we are concerned, government may not be saying or doing anything of this. But why is the government silent and not even telling us that they'll take action? How come that you have people preaching this communal hatred and intolerance and there's no action against them?
We have so much more to talk about, but we'll have to slip into a short break now. We'll continue talking to Mr. Yechury on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television in conversation with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of India, Mr. Sitaram Yechury. Mr. Yechury, let's talk about the left and what plans you have for the left in the years to come, or the months to come actually, not even years, because there are two very crucial polls, Kerala and West Bengal, and you certainly want to make an impression and want to make a comeback in these two states.
That's right. Well, we are gearing ourselves up to this. It's a very big battle. And as far as Kerala is concerned, we have registered a very big victory in the recent local body elections, where the entire state goes to polls, so to speak. And we've had an unprecedented victory there, which is good news as far as we are concerned. We'll have to ensure that that continues till the assembly elections. But as far as Bengal is concerned, there's a very serious problem. And that problem there is that we are now combating what we would call politics of terror and intimidation and violence. If people are allowed to cast their vote without the fear of such consequences, then it's a very good chance for the left to make a comeback there. But that is something which we are very apprehensive about. We have already lost, as far as the CPIM is concerned, I can tell you, we have already lost more than 500 of our comrades in the last few years. Thousands upon thousands actually have to leave their place of habitation, their home, and go somewhere else for safety. Now, this is the reality there. Now, therefore, I don't think it's democracy at play in Bengal, because we've had worse than what we are talking about intolerance at the center in the state of West Bengal in various aspects. So the people's resentment and anger, which should reflect in the election, Question is whether it would be allowed to reflect or not. We are battling it. We'll continue to battle. But I think it's a very serious issue before Indian democracy itself. And that is a big challenge for us. We are gearing up to take up the challenge.
Are you ready for the polls? Are you ready? Are you poll bound? I mean,
Whenever polls come, we are ready. And we believe that that is what all parties in our country must be. But we are ready. But we are ready, we are telling you the constraints in which Bengal elections will take place.
somewhere the youth have felt disenchanted with the left, because in the past we've seen that the youth were really the driving force of the left. But of late, over the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen a little bit of disenchantment. So how are you reaching out to the youth and trying to bring them back into your fold?
You see, there have been very, very structural reasons for this as well. If you notice, in the period that you're talking about, the last decade or so, there's been a very rapid rise of all your private educational institutions, your private universities, etc. In none of these, you have the right for students' unions to exist. So students' unions, students' debates, students' politics, this was the arena in which the student, all of us, all of us were actually exposed to the various things that were there, and they took positions. So that is the attraction for the youth towards not only the left, but to politics. I wouldn't say it's a problem only with the left in our country. This structural change has actually depoliticized the youth, which is dangerous for the country. And that depoliticization is going on. We are trying to resist it. In many places we are.
How are you trying to resist it?
In the sense that we are reaching out to these students who otherwise are not being, they cannot be reached out to, or they do not have the opportunity. You just look at the IIT Madras, a study circle on discussing Ambedkar and Pereira. On that there were restrictions imposed. So if the youth and the students are not going to discuss all these issues, how do you expect them to play a very meaningful role in nation building? Now that is something, it's a long-term fight, but we are today, we are reaching out to the youth outside of the educational institutions, such educational institutions. And in many of the traditional educational institutions, you see the youth organization is coming back in a big way. Whether it's in Bengal, whether it's in Kerala, whether it's in Rajasthan, whether it's in Himachal. So it's not that the youth have deserted you, but the structural situation in the country is such, and that is dangerous not only for political parties, but I believe for nation building itself. You remember, we are 2/3 of our population are youth.
Yes.
We are the youngest country in the world today. And it's all the other issues of demographic advantage we have, etc., leave them aside. But if this youth of ours is not aware politically, if it doesn't take part in nation building positively, then it's a problem for the country itself. But we are trying to tackle it. Now, there are various ways in which you have to reach out to the youth. Social media is one of that, very important.
Talking about social media, that's a bus that you missed, because the left has so many intellectuals, and you could have really capitalized on the entire social media mania as such. But that's something that you did not do.
No.
Would you?
Well, there may be a time lag. But yes, but we are overcoming the time lag, and you will see it soon. It's already much strides have been made in the social media, and you'll find the left a very powerful,
No, there is
feature.
potential there, because at the end of the day, the left is a bunch of intellectuals, and they could have made most use of social media, but that does not happen. That has not happened. Would you at least concede that did not happen, and maybe now you're trying to catch up?
There was a lag, I concede, and now that is attempts are there to catch up, and I think we are catching up, and very soon you'll find it difficult. But remember, the left doesn't play the game of commercialized social media. You could buy followers, I believe, today from some countries at a certain price, and do up all those tricks in social media, which we don't do, and I don't think there's a need for it. There is a thirst among the Indian youth to know the truth, know the facts, and know a scientific basis for what is happening. I mean, you'd be surprised. Many of our speeches in Parliament on the Constitution are now, I mean, students have got back in me, saying that about my intervention there, saying that this is a good, class for us in political science. I mean, how the Indian Constitution evolved, etc.
Yes.
So very good. I mean, there's a very what do you call? I was very happy with the response. That if this is happening with our youth, then it's very good. So don't blame the youth. You have to blame the situation today, whereby the youth is deliberately being kept out of political awareness, and we need to break it, and that's being broken.
One more allegation made against the left is the fact that, you're anti-reforms. I say that because the BJP has time and again said that you've been anti-GST bill, you've been anti-land acquisition bill, so you're anti-reform.
No, but that is I mean, can't you just see through the game? I mean, what is reform? Tell me. We have said, tell me any pro-people reform, where have been anti? We have been promoting it. Rural employment, that's also a reform. Huh? We moved it, we pushed it, and that has really saved the lives of, I think, some millions of people in rural India. For a food security bill.
You're against FDI as well?
No, FDI for what? You tell me. We said FDI should come in, which if it augments my production capacities. FDI coming in to take over existing production capacities of no use. FDI must come in order to enlarge employment opportunities, not deplete them, like the FDI in retail trade, for instance. Or FDI must come in that will upgrade India technologically. Let these three conditions be satisfied. Where is the opposition by the left? Now instead, what are you doing? FDI in defense production, FDI in trade, FDI in banking, FDI in insurance. Now what is this for? The global economy is tottering. You want these multinational corporations, etc. They're looking for markets. They're looking for new source of raw material and cheap human capital. They want to bolster their profits. You're giving them the opportunity. How does it help you? Tell me. How does this foreign capital coming into India help me if it doesn't create employment? And if people don't have money to buy what they will produce, how will it help me? Now that is the question we ask, and that's a straightforward, simple question, which is very, very uncomfortable for the people. You tell me today, if after 20 years of reform of Dr. Manmohan Singh as finance minister in 1991, look at all the indicators that he quoted in that speech. I've said that in Parliament. All the indicators that he quoted in that speech, whether it's your trade deficit, whether it's economic growth, whether it's the rate of inflation, all the parameters that he quoted are worse off today. What have reforms given you? So ask these questions also. No, are they not relevant? Are farmers committing suicide? They call the annadatas of our country. If they are committing suicides, distress suicides, if our youth is moving around aimlessly because jobs are not being created, what is this reforms leading to growth? You have one India, a shining India, 100 billionaires. So you say, damn good, but everything is doing hunky-dory. And on the other hand, your census data gives you 90% of Indian households, 90% have an income of less than 10,000 rupees a month. Is that growth? Growth for whom?
One final question, because the Parliament is in session. Do you see any legislative business being taking place in the next few days?
If the government of the day builds a consensus, it will happen automatically and very smoothly. The consensus.
So you're saying the onus is on the government now to ensure that the House functions?
Absolutely. Absolutely, the onus is on the government, because consensus building for functioning of the Parliament has to be done mainly outside of it. It can be done even inside of it, but not inside the houses.
One allegation made in the past is that the government has not reached out to the opposition. Is the government making efforts to reach out to the opposition?
I mean, none whatsoever as far as we know, because they've not reached out to us on any of the matters. If they're reaching out to somebody else, then maybe an ephemeral figure that goes back to Hindu mythology, but not about the existing reality.
Okay. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of To The Point. Thank you so much, Mr. Yechury, for joining me on the program and sharing your views on several of those topics that we discussed here.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.